the point of all behavior is to move well and achieve a state of weightlessness. This is true on I believe, I'm convinced it's true on every level of life, from the lowest organism to the highest. And as you watch this dog running, it's just pure joy. And it's mechanically, it's characterized by 2 beats of total weightlessness, where it's at the 4 legs are extended, all 4 legs off the ground, and then all 4 legs collected underneath, and it's suspended. My theory is that these surges of momentum, when it's thrusting forward and then gathering back in on that beat right there, those are 2 separate surges of momentum back and forth through the body. So if you were to put yourself on a swing, you could duplicate that. You go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And those momenta, those 2 surges of momentum, merge in the heart and comprise the feeling of weightlessness. And my theory is that the dog, the animal mind, and our animal mind as well, can hold on to that feeling in the heart. And that any true feeling is predicated on that feeling of weightlessness. So you could start listening to music, for example, as a wonderful experience of weightlessness, which would be exactly akin to this animal running at full speed. And once you get into the ups and the downs of the music and you love the pattern, the melody, the rhythms, etc., you enter a state of weightlessness. And then you feel lifting and falling, and you get the whole arc of the experience. And I would like to emphasize there's no thinking involved. If you're thinking, you realize you're missing the music. So that's a way of knowing. That wonderful term was just coined, critical feeling. A way of knowing, critical feeling, that arises from a state of being attuned with the heart. So everything about the animal, about our physiology, our neurology, every part of our body and mind evolved to maximize or maintain a state of well-being. We all want to be in a state of well-being. So if you could move as fast as possible toward what you want, or as fast as possible away from what you fear, emotionally, you're doing the best that you can do. If you could guaranteed to run out of a crashing plane, you could somehow just open the door and run right down to the ground, take a lot of stress out of flying. So to get to a state of well-being is synonymous with weightlessness, because you're moving well. And this state of weightlessness, when you're in a state of weightless, you're heart-centered, you can project that onto other living beings and form emotional affiliations. That's the basis of an emotional bond. And my theory is that when a dog starts to associate weightlessness with situations, that he can choose physiological states to be in and control what his situation is. And this is really the essence of rehabilitation of a damaged or PTSD, a traumatized dog, is he can be in a difficult situation and choose to be calm and relaxed. But to get to that point, his shoulders must be relaxed. His jaws must be supple and open. And so if we look at that Greyhound running at full speed, we see the complete example of heart-centeredness. His jaws are relaxed. Energy's flowing through his body without resistance. There's 200,000 volts of stimulatory input. They got some rabbit ahead of him. So his body is transmitting all the energy of stimulation. There's no blockage. He's not holding back. His rear end and front end are in total syncopation and working 100% efficiently. He's having the time of his life. His jaws are relaxed. His shoulders are loose. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to move that well. And that is the mechanics of heart-centeredness. And once you have a heart-centered mind, then you can affiliate with your surroundings and everything in it. One exercise I like to do at a workshop is, people want to do what's best for their dog and they want to understand their dog. So I ask them to write down everything you like about your dog. And be relatively brief, but be expansive and write it all down. And then write down, after you complete that, the next thing you do is write down everything you don't like about your dog. And then you can backfill a little bit and explain, why do you think your dog likes that? Why do you think your dog does what you don't like him to do? And spend a good amount of time fleshing that out. A lot of thoughts will come to you. And so that is the beginning exercise to start to parse apart heart energy from mental energy. My mantra is, or what I discovered, is everything we feel about a dog is true, but everything we think about the dog is wrong. So what we've just done is write down an emotional audit of what we think about our own heart. Because dogs and heart energy are synonymous, and you'll notice whatever we say about heart, we likewise say of the dog. He's persistent, he's brave, he's loyal, he's courageous, he's steadfast. The very same things we attribute to heart energy. So the two are synonymous. So in my background, living with dogs, I realized that what owners were thinking about their dogs wasn't accurate. So what we've actually written here is what we think about heart, not what we feel. So everything that you wrote about your dog isn't in your dog's head. It's what we have projected into his head. It's what we think about him. And you've just done an audit of judgments you carry against your own heart. And we're so attracted to dogs on one level through our unresolved emotional baggage. And what we love about dogs, what we're trying to do is turn the dog into a person so we can resolve that unresolved emotion that he triggers. And because he doesn't act like a person, he must be an angel. We turn him then into this divinity because he doesn't act like a person. He doesn't betray me. He's still loyal. He loves me no matter what. So they take on this lofty image in our mind as super people beings. But then we miss the nature of heart, and heart knows no reason. Heart is persistent and dogged and wants what you want and will fight to the death to get what you want. It's serious. It's not romantic 100%. There's a serious side. Heart does the work of evolution. I like to say love does work. It's not just a romantic sentimentality. It is what, so the predator would be the heart of the ecosystem, and he goes after the prey, and then the whole ecosystem gets balanced. And we could talk about the Yellowstone wolf in that context. The whole ecosystem came back into harmony because they reintroduced heart energy, the wolf. The ultimate heart predator is the wolf, unlike any other predator, apex predator. But I would like to put human beings into that category as well. If we go by feel, critical feeling as opposed to critical thinking. Or if the critical thinking supports the critical feeling, you're golden. That's fine. So, but the main thing is, as we do this audit, those are thoughts that keep you separate from your dog, i.e. separate from your own heart. So when you're in your heart, your dog is completely aligned with you. He can feel you. I give an experiment is, if you're talking to your dog, where is the center of your consciousness? I would suggest it's right here. But if you're just massaging your dog and not talking, I would then say your center's here. And that he loves. That's the part he can relate to. So as we get clear with our heart connection with our dog, there's nothing you have to do to be worthy, to be deserving. Because you'll notice in the market today, there's so much we're supposed to be doing to be worthy of a good dog. They even want to call it a dog parent. Are you a good dog parent? And they don't want you to be an owner. They want you to be a guardian. And it's all creating a gap between you and your own heart. Your dog is your heart. So what we would like to do is get to know that intimately, to rediscover ourselves. Because if we're in our heart, our dog feels connected, even if we totally ignore him. Doesn't matter. So, a common thought that we have about dogs is that certain dogs are dominant. And that reflects our fear that A, we're not dominant or we're too dominant. It could be either polarity. It could be we're very dominant and we see that in our dog and that's a good thing. Or we feel we should be more dominant. We're milquetoast and our dog is expressing dominance. And so we attribute his behavior to dominance. And in my model, I realized that dominance, submission, stubbornness, willfulness, those are all states of confusion, actually. So I ask people to substitute the word confused for dominant, submissive. He's overly submissive. No, he's overly confused. Anything he does we don't like is a state of confusion, not that he's being this way or that way. So when we describe the dog in those terms, we're actually describing what we fear we might be like or we fear we should be more like. We're projecting that onto the dog as an extension of ourselves. And you typically find that meek, mild-mannered people have these very aggressive dogs. And overly bearing people will have these timid dogs. And one reflects, the overly bearing one would most likely reflect a fear of emotion. And they repress it in the dog. And so he's manifesting their fear of emotion. Meanwhile, the other person is afraid to have that strong heart energy. So the dog is expressing the externalizing of that. Once I was training a dog, I always screwed up training dogs, and it was always my fault. So there's this one dog came in for protection training, and I was just dedicated myself to doing every little thing right, according to my father's protocol, who I was working with. He owned a big kennel. He was the first police dog trainer in America, and might have been one of the first family dog trainers in America. So this dog was for training, and we went step by step. It was like Swiss clock making. And we got to the final step, which is the dog bites and has to let go. And I said out to the dog after he has a fight with my dad on the padded sleeve. And my father goes still. We let the dog register that everything's quiet now. And I'm the dominant leader. And I now approach my dog and say, out, let go of the sleeve. And he didn't. He started growling and biting harder. And the more I yelled out, the harder he bit. Then my dad started saying, well, correct him. I started jerking the leash. So I started jerking. The more I jerked the leash, the harder he bit. I saw a level of ferocity come out of the dog that we had never even seen before. So finally, my dad's getting so mad, and he says, take the end of the leash and whack the dog right in the muzzle. So I did once or twice to no effect and really hit him, and bam, I finally hit him hard enough he let go. As he went back to my side, I gathered him into a sit. I could just feel his energy melting, subsiding, like he lost. And I was totally confused, because here we are at the final step, after hundreds of steps. Every step to that point was predicated on the nature of the dog, and it worked. Everything my dad told me to do worked, and we went 100 steps in a row, perfect. It all worked. We got to the 101st final step, and it all fell apart in my mind as a young trainer. I said, I was on his side in that fight. All of a sudden, it was dog against two people. And I could see the dog felt defeated. Now, we recovered him, and it looked okay, but I could always see a touch of conflict in that dog. And at this point in my working career under that system, I knew my father didn't have the answers for why I was confused, why after all that perfect build-up, it fell apart in my mind. And I could always see that little touch of confusion in the dog for the rest of the time we worked with him, even though I was pretty good at covering up. Whenever he got confused, I was pretty good at covering it up and moving it along so nobody noticed it. But it bothered me. So I realized I was totally confused. And I resolved to understand what was going on. And the neat thing about that was it started to pull things into my realm of awareness that helped me get out of that state of confusion. But the main thing that I did that was therapeutic was I didn't try to get rid of that state of confusion. I stayed in it. And I think I even said to myself at the time, well, now I know how he feels. Now I know one thing that a dog feels for sure. And it turns out that our state of confusion, it's like we all have a broken compass, but it does point south to a state of confusion. And if you just stay present with a state of confusion and don't try to, our brain hates, our higher rational processes hate to be in a state of confusion. There's nothing scarier than being confused. And in the course of developing my theory and model, I became comfortable with being confused, where two things should have led to the third thing and they didn't. So I would stay present with it, and sooner or later the answer would come to you. Ask and ye shall receive. It turns out to be very true. With a reliable benchmark of confusion, it turns out you can start to parse apart emotional experience. And what I love about the word confusion is the opposite of fusion. So things get welded in your heart when you want something with a pure hunger. You're wide open to it. And synonymous with being wide open, however, is a state of vulnerability. And this is the origin of a want. And it's known to us through our hunger circuitry. Now, the problem when you're in a state of vulnerability is it's very easy to get hurt. So we very quickly, I don't care how lovingly one is raised, you very quickly learn to insulate yourself from a want because it's affiliated most intimately with pain. And then whatever social judgment is attached to that. So what happens is with these attachments and these judgments is that we no longer feel safe to want. We have to attach it to a need. And that's a way we can justify a want. But a need is always based on fear, a fear of a collapse of some sort, which precludes our ability to manifest that want because we're no longer vulnerable. We're already insulated and we've contravened it. So we'll notice, like, if kids are playing a game and they're in pure want, in their world of imagination, it's real to them and it's all make-believe. Yet it's completely real, and they've gone into a state of total suspension. They've suspended all rational parameters. They're no longer in their house. They're no longer who they normally are. And then an adult strays into the scene and says, "Hey, what are you kids doing?" First thing they say, "Nothing." They right away go into guard mode because you pop the bubble of suspension of pure want and put them into need. So they might have to justify what they're doing. But if you ask them, "What do you want to do?" "Nothing." "What's the matter?" "Nothing." That reflects the guardedness. And it doesn't matter how lovingly a child, it's the way when the puppy is running or the baby is running, they reach too far for something they want, they face plant pain. So they associate that pain with wanting what they were going for. The young organism or any animal never goes for what it doesn't want, always wants it. But it runs into pain. And that then becomes attached to a need. So all other animals, the vast majority of animals, are need-based. That's what an instinct is. And they are limited by that instinct. What makes the dog the heart is we select the wolf in his communal hunting style of a prey too big for anyone to have over to get on its own. His hunger was stronger than fear. And then when domestication came around, it amplified that 100-fold. So the dog hungers for that which he cannot get on his own. And that makes him social. That's a pure want. And that's what we're supposed to learn about dogs, is the way I like to explain it, is all other animals are niche adapted. They're adapted to a specific environmental niche. And only in a rare moment do they reacquire that signal we saw in the Greyhound, where they get to run at full speed and re-evoke joy. The little baby foal, you see it with a foal. Little baby, all the baby goats and everything, you see it right up when they're born. They have pure joy. They can jump for no reason. Pure heart energy, but they quickly lose it. Instincts take over. Species-specific instincts take over. And that's the only way you're going to make it in the wild. Whereas the dog is considered inferior because he won't make it in the wild. But that's his strength. He's got so much hunger. A good expression is the bear hunters will say, "There's no such thing as a brave bear hunting dog, only a smart hunting dog." Because if you take some of these dogs out there with sheer drive, they'll just run right in and get themselves killed. The hunger's too strong. So to make it in the wild, the instincts take over. And it's so interesting, we think of living in the wild as total freedom, and the dog as brought into constraint. And yet it's the opposite. The dog, by connecting with humans and manifesting more and more want through that unbridled hunger, is experiencing much more freedom than a wolf in the wild. My working title to my book, Natural Dog Training, was Born Wild, Trained to be Free. So if your dog achieves total rapport with you, so he and you want the same thing, then you got the happiest dog on earth. A helpful way to start getting into critical feeling, the skill of critical feeling and cultivating it, is to understand these layers that are attached and buffered against the pure want. So as usually I go from the top down, so I'll start at the top. Anger is not an emotional, pure emotion or a true feeling. It's externalizing fear. So the dog, it's not accurate to say a dog is angry, just to be precise here. He can externalize fear, which looks like anger. Now we are true anger because we'll think about what we're doing as we're doing it. And that is a true anger. But the dog, we could say they're synonymous in the sense that the same substrate's there. So there's anger protects us from guilt. Guilt would be the equal opposite of anger, a collapse, an implosion versus an explosion. Guilt protects us from fear. Fear protects us from pain. And pain protects us from wanting. So in order to get down, what I learned working with problem dogs was amazing. Is at first the problem dog comes in, he won't take food from me. He won't want pure. And he's hungry, but he won't take food from my hand. So I got to feed him by himself. He eats and he associates me. He eventually gets comfortable enough to start taking food from my hand. And once he felt completely pure about wanting, and I moved my hand fast, he cowered. He dropped to the ground like I whacked him. And I saw the damage that was attached to the want. I didn't see it up to then. But of course, he came in because he bit people in the hand. But it came out of the anger state. So people thought it was due to anger. But you have to get through all those layers to get back to the want. And that want, in the beginning, once there's damage, it's like a little soap bubble. You know, if you touch it, you pop it. But what we can learn from the dog is how to harden it to a PVC pipe you can drive an 18-wheeler over, and it won't collapse. That's what I learned through trained police dogs. I took the same little tiny want, I want that fluffy toy that every dog is born with, and we keep increasing it and increasing it. And then we attach all these skills to it. He'll sit down, stay, go, search, hide, hold, don't bite, do bite. All these things we attach to the want. That's all we did. If you're in pure state of want and you got something that you like, but you're not devoted to it, and a little child or somebody comes up and says, oh, I love that thing. You want to give it to them. We want the person who wants it the most to have what they want. And my expression with wolves, to get back to the want, is if everybody does what they most want, everybody gets what they want most. So they all have this hunger, this unsatisfiable hunger. Social contact won't satisfy. Companionship won't satisfy. Only overcoming a huge challenge through collective action satisfies it. So they all want to sink their teeth into the moose with all their might. So if everybody has that organizing want, then they polarize around the prey. One takes the rear end, one nips at the flanks until they get it confused. What does confusion mean? The prey is no longer in his heart. So what does the prey do? He goes into instinct. And what does that mean? He flees. And then they get him. That's nature's way. So what the wolves do is they put an intense emotional charge on the herd. And the ones who vibrate are the ones that are confused. They're disconnected from their body. They lost their heart connection. But, you know, predators have to eat. So those are the ones that get caught. Invariably, they're the sick, the weak, the old, the infirm. And they leave the strong ones alone. We'll see you next year. The interesting about a state of confusion is you're at your closest to a state of vulnerability, which means you're right next door to wanting purely. And what happened in my experience with learning about the dogs was because of this confusion, when I got my way out of that particular confusion, I was stronger about a want. And it was very easy. I mean, I was developing this model and this theory. It was very easy for my father to knock it out of me, or a customer would challenge me and I would get like confused. But I got to a point at some point when I stayed present with the confusion, because the advantage I have is being raised in the business and with thousands and thousands of dogs, is I could see the limitation to my dad's model, even though he had accolades and made tons of money and everybody respected him and he was great in many, many ways with his dog work. But I could see the limits to it that made me confused. So I never lost that state of confusion. I didn't have will yet, but I had, and will comes from gratifying the wants. And then you recollect your unresolved emotion of all things that fragmented you and you got chipped away at. Now you need to please and be safe around others. But I finally got to the point where I got so strong in the want to know, to the point where nobody could knock me out of it. And I could recapitulate it when all heck was breaking loose. But I learned to, if I went into a state of confusion, stay present with it, and the answer always came and gave me a new aspect of technique or theory or whatever. So when you're in a state of confusion, you're as close as possible to being near the want, because it's the same state of vulnerability. And once you fuse your hunger to that object of wanting, then you're no longer confused. You're in your heart. Yeah, so if we turn to things that we might write about our dog, we're walking down the trail with our dog and he walks up ahead 100 yards and you might see something coming and you want your dog to come to you, so you call your dog and he looks at you. Then he looks up the trail, he starts to see the new people coming or the dog on the horizon. He looks at you, looks at the dog, looks at you, and then takes off. My customer said, well, he just blew me off. And now I know, well, they have a fear of being blown off. Because what really happened was he got excited. He looked at the owner and couldn't feel her. He looked at the dog and started to feel a pull. He looked, and so what he's trying to do is get a feeling. He's looked at the owner. Now, if he looks at his owner, who's now demanding, okay, Fido, come here, and he's feeling free and wanting in the woods. So once you take a dog into the woods, they open up to want, pure want. Nature just releases them, the smells, the sights, the green, and now they're in a pure want. And he's looking at the owner who says, no, don't get in a want, you blower offerer, you. And he can't feel her. Now, he does not know that's the owner he loves because he can't feel her. And he sees the dog and he sees all that non-judgmental, playful energy, the swishing tail. He's a happy-go-lucky dog or whatever it happens to be, or the deer. He runs to the deer. So it's not that he manifested this complex human thing of blowing off. That's what the owner put in there. And that blowing me off means my dog doesn't respect me, which means the owner's trying to get respect. There's two ways you can try to get respect through need. You can be controlling, or you can always negotiate. Was this okay? You want more, you want more, you want this, you want that. You can be too solicitous to the dog, and you're trying to negotiate his attachment to you, but it doesn't work that way. It's a pure want you have to manifest. And so the first thing we want to do with a dog is share a want that he can put his heart into, i.e. sink his teeth into it, which is why I start with the bite work with my puppies, is so that he wants what I want. And that way we're both in tune with the want. And there's no judgment. And here's something unique about heart. Only the dog can want what we want no matter what. No other animal can. Your cat can't want what you want as much as you want. So I love my cat. I say, I got a sweet cat. She's a sweetheart. But I never say she's all heart. And the reason is she can't want what I want. She can't fight for what I want. So the only two animals we say are all heart are dogs and horses. Of course, horses will fight to win. We go to the track and we see them race to win, and they're fighting to be first. So we say, that horse, he's all heart. So that's the doing a work part of heart and love, is it's meant to be out there churning and getting us to bump into things. But it also gives the information how to bump into things in an organized way so everybody benefits. And that's the other thing we have to learn from dogs. The mistake we're making with dogs as well, just to digress for a second, is whenever they do something lofty, we misattribute to their thinking. And whenever they do something we don't like, we say they're wild, they're unpredictable, or they're emotional, or temperamental. We'll say it's temperamental. Completely missing. It's the other way around. Whenever they do something we don't like, it's the central nervous system with instincts that is the problem. Whenever they do something we love, we shouldn't give credit to the higher function. We should give credit to the heart. So there's many people talking romantically about heart, but then because it's just romance and sentiment, they're not giving credit to the intelligent adaptiveness to the heart energy. It's just a wonderful expression. It's not actually tangible. But if you see the dog clear-eyed, you will see heart for real and doing what it's meant to do. And from that follow all the high social virtues of altruism and companionship, be by your side, peace. Because we attach want with being unsafe and need with being safe, we therefore want us, and therefore our dog is this person to help us trigger our stuff, but he doesn't act like a person, he's non-judgmental, so now we feel received. We want to see a lot of personality out of our dog. And what I learned in the problem dog was personality is a defense. In the short term, it's a wonderful adaptive coping mechanism. You know, the first 10 minutes of a cocktail party, you know how to be nice for 2 minutes in the elevator. It's a wonderful way to cope with difficult situations. It's adaptive, but you're losing energy when you're in personality. So personality is a defense. And what made this so clear to me was all the dogs that were problematic generated a lot of personality. Personality radiates from fear and need, and it's a vibration, and it precludes getting manifesting a pure want. Gets in the way of wanting. And with dogs, what I realized was that it's a way of gaining control. It's actually a manipulative thing. Once you get success at it, you start to rely on that strategy. And you can manipulate people, and whatever you get in return, you can get addicted to that return on that effort. But the mistake we make is that personality, i.e. friendliness, is synonymous with sociability, and that's not true. Now, invariably, in any group, one wants more than another. And that one, go first, go for it. I'm right behind you. That's where leadership self-organizes from. It doesn't come from force of personality. So it's very interesting when we study dogs, wolves. They always want to put personality in there. Dominant, submissive, alpha, omega. But what's really happening is I call it a hierarchy of little wants, or I like to call it a hierarchy of feeling. Whoever wants it the most goes first. So it's very fluid. We give the weakest one, so-called weakest one, the bone. And he growls and menaces at the alpha that comes over to look at his bone. He can taste it. He can feel it. So the want is most clear to him. It's his. So if there were a true dominant hierarchy, if there were such a thing as dominance in the mind of an animal, that alpha should discipline him for that. But he doesn't. He lets it go. Oh yeah, you want it. Why would I want it if you want it? So it's a beautiful form of self-organization. It all comes around to want. But the human psyche likes to see control. And we read dominant submission, alpha control. And what we're actually reading in is a judgment against heart. If I control you, I'll get what I want. That's a judgment against heart. And if we look at our emotional audit, we'll see that's undercurrent, everything we wrote about what we don't like about our dog. And even what we do like about our dog is undercurrent. So if we look with a very clear eye to what we wrote, we can come up with some very astute observations of the way we judge against. So if we think of our heart as an animal, we can see how we judge against that animal in terms of how we relate to the dog. The hallmark signature of vibrating is you're in your head and you'll feel pressure in your head. And the more resistance is thrown at you, the more discomfort is thrown at you, the more pressure you feel in your head. It's a head-centric, brain-centric orientation. We become top-heavy. And we're very easily knocked off balance. Whereas when you're heart-centered, you're rooted, you're grounded, you cannot be knocked off balance. I like the example of Tai Chi, is when they develop a root. And when one of these Tai Chi masters has a root, 10 people can't knock him off. 10 people can't, because all the energy he puts into his root. And then he collects it. And it's like a knot. The harder you pull, the stronger it grips. And then when it's time to project, he projects. So when you're in personality, you're vibrating, you can't wait till it's over. And you're very tippy, very easy to take offense. You laugh at things that aren't funny, and you're afraid to say a joke because it might bomb. You're afraid to take chances, or maybe you say too much that you shouldn't have said. So you lack that discrimination. You don't read the room, as they say. Yeah. The other problem with the personality is you're so concerned about out vibrating what's around you. You can't listen, you can't absorb, you can't take it in, you can't integrate with the person. So you go to the cocktail party, the first 10 minutes, it's adaptive because we all generate personality. But after a while, you discover someone who has a common want. Oh, you like to ski? I love to ski. Where do you ski? Oh, I go Brahmi. Oh, Brahmi's nice, but you ever go to Stratton? Yeah, that's really nice. I got the village there. Now you're starting to feel flow. Now you're in your body. Now your heart's centered. And everything starts to connect. Another thing that happens is, why do we serve food at every social event? Why is food so integral with festivals and things? Why don't we just go to people's houses for scintillating conversation? Why do they have to serve us food? And the reason is when we start eating and drinking, we get into our body. And then once we're rooted in our body, we can then feel safe to make the heart connection. And so personality is adaptive, but it's exhausting. And if you think the personality is the core, then you're in trouble. So a lot of people think their dog's happy, friendly personality is his core, and then they're mystified why he's afraid of thunderstorms. Why does he freak out about this or that? Oh, he's been friendly for 2 years and he bites the neighbor. Where'd that come from? And it's not out of the blue. So we have these myths of Jekyll and Hyde and dogs turning and going berserk, chemical imbalance. We have all these myths, and it's got nothing to do with those. It's purely about people who are always rewarding their personality. Personality is always internalizing. And personality, the important thing about personality is it can't move much energy. It's also part of the load overload movement of energy. So you personality, and finally you blow up. Like the person with road rage is holding back, but when he's in his car, he starts to feel safe and free, and all of a sudden blows up, load overload. Where'd that come from? So personality can't move much energy, but a want held in the heart, fused with an external object of desire, can move all the energy. And everybody can get what they want then. A good example of my own personal experience of learning not to vibrate is I had understood that the dogs that I admired and that were great workers, they didn't vibrate. And the dogs that were problematic vibrated a lot, and they leaked energy, et cetera, et cetera. And so I knew that my personality was like that. When I needed something, I vibrated a lot. And so it was the very beginning where you could get a loan in the wild and woolly days. So I applied for a loan. I needed a loan for something. I applied for it, and it was a good rate. Unbeknownst to me, I was getting sucked into a bait and switch, but I didn't know that. So when I called the broker up, was getting close to closing, I needed to get that thing. All of a sudden, the rate was much higher, way out of my budget. So I wanted to vibrate and say, oh no, you probably, I was going to generate all this personality, but instead I got completely monotone. And I said, but you said it was 5.2. And I felt very bizarre talking in that flatline, non-expressive way. But the fascinating thing was I could hear at the other end the guy started vibrating. He started generating all this. He's trying to talk me. Yeah, well, things changed and, the rates have gone up and the Fed did this and that and gold is blah, blah, blah. But you said it was 5.2. I kept just saying that. It went against my entire life history. So finally he says, all right, let me check my notes. I'll call you back. Now I knew it was just face saving. So he called me back. Next thing he calls me, okay, I found my notes. You're right. I did say 5.2, and I talked to the manager, and we can still do it. Amazingly, things have shifted, but we can still do it. Thank you. So by not vibrating, I reflected him back to him. I reflected his BS back to him, and he started beating himself up. So, that's why personality won't get you what you want, just what you need. Now, when we do this emotional audit, we will also write down, how do I feel when my dog does what I like? And even more importantly, how do I feel when my dog does what I don't like? And my journey in dog training and developing this model is when a dog acted problematically, I felt humiliated, embarrassed, ashamed. And I'm saying to myself, why am I feeling this way? I'm a trainer. And it made me look like, oh, he's a bad trainer. And I was realizing I was being judged by external authority figures. Someone was looking over my shoulder and judging me. And my shame was that it was referencing me outside of me through somebody else's eyes that put the shame in there in the first place. So when I was working with problem dogs and they want to bite me, I learned to attract it. Because I arrived at the understanding emotion, this energy, thermodynamics. There's no such thing as bad energy. This was just stuck volcanic energy. If I got it to move, I trusted it would turn into coherent energy, and that's always social, trusting, heart will eventually take over. You go to the therapist and they trigger your stuff. I mean, they don't say, don't show me your junk. They say, show me your junk. Let's bring it up. Let's talk about it. Let's deal with it. But in dog training, it's the opposite. We say, don't show me your junk. Stuff it more. And all these training systems are based on stuffing the dog's energy, distracting him from the energy. And what I learned was the opposite. Attract it in a safe way. And I created methods of safe so you could attract it and be safe. But the dog was able to get that violence out of his system. And it always ran pure. So what I came to learn about these feelings I was having, or, I call them feelings, but they're emotional sensations and experiences. It's not a true feeling. That shame, none of these things are true feelings. What they were new energy trying to come in to my system. It was a chance for me to move my shame and process it, just like it was a chance for the dog to move his fear, aggression, and process it. So I learned to trust that even his aggression was just energy. If energy moves, it's always healthy, always. And, what goes through our walls in these houses and buildings is 220 volts of energy that could kill you. But we walk in here, we're not worried about it because it's conducted, it's channeled. And if it moves to ground, it's always safe. So what I did was define an object that became the dog's ground, move all your energy to it. So the question was, why was I feeling shame if it's new energy and it's healthful? And the reason is it can only come in through your fault. The new energy can only come in through the cracks. Wherever you're scarred, whatever cut you, that's where it comes in. I mean, where's the earthquake move magma? At the fault line. It doesn't come out of healthy crust, it comes out of fractured crust. So wherever the scar is, that's where it comes out. So if I judged against myself, oh my God, I'm embarrassing myself in front of these people or customers, other trainers, then all I'm doing is reinforcing my stuckness. But if I let it move, and the expression I like is playing with fire without getting burned. Everybody loves it. All of a sudden, everybody loves it because they see the joy in the dog eventually, and they see that I'm feeling the flow. And it changed the whole tenor of the thing so that people started to enjoy it, watching it rather than, but at first, when they first see it, they think it's bad. It's bad energy. And I like to give an example is there's no such thing as bad gravity. Yeah, if you fall off a building, you're dead. But you don't say, man, that gravity was really bad today. It's just a force that holds you to the earth. It's an attraction. It's good. It's always good. You just have to work with it and conduct it and be on channeled surfaces, et cetera, et cetera. So energy moves through. The way I learned this model was I was releasing a dog's energy. He was getting worse, so to speak. But if I stayed non-judgmental and brought it to ground, it always turned it from the bubble to the pipe you could drive the truck over. And so when you don't like what your dog is doing, write down what it is that triggers in you. That's how new energy is getting into your system. Now, old energy just doesn't come out lovingly. It comes out explosively. But we can create conduits for it to come out safely. And it always smooths out. The water comes out of the mountain. It's tumbling. It's white water. You crush you. But by the time it reaches the ocean, it's nice and smooth and soft. And you can paddleboard and everybody's safe. So what I learned was I could turn that turbulence into that broad channel where the waters were still. And then you do whatever you want. And what's cool about constructive law is it shows there's even more force in that broad, wide channel than out of those narrow headwaters. It's actually moving more energy faster, more efficiently. So once you got your dog channeled like that, he looks so calm, so happy, but he could move much more energy, the steady state. But when you're in the judgment mode and you're trying to keep that shame down, you're in load overload. Sooner or later, something will trigger it. It'll come out explosively, but not safely. And then we say, we blame emotion for that. Then we blame emotion. Oh, that person's too emotional. It's the exact opposite. Too instinctual, no emotion whatsoever. There's no channel, there's no object for that energy. There's a judgment against energy. So if you look at all the training systems and the way we look at animals and emotion is we judge against it. And we want to control it, which is why we love to see the dominance paradigm in animal social structure. What's so important about constructive law is it shows the same design in non-living systems. No genes, no central, no leader, and yet they're manifesting the exact same hierarchical arrangement. So it should have sparked a huge revolution in animal understanding by this point, but that's our job, is to broaden this discussion to the actual social behavior, the actual way emotion works in our bodies, between us and our dog, within the dog's body. If we could see that more clearly, we'll start to shift to a much more accepting understanding of how emotion works in us. And if we don't judge it, it always runs the sociability, always. It's built into its nature. One way I was able to parse apart, understand that everything was energy. Energy's always, the movement of energy is always good. And it's got to have a ground to move toward to be coherent. But I learned through my work that emotion is always positive in both meanings of the word, something pleasurable and something concrete and tangible. So, and a true feeling always feels good. So even if you're listening to really melancholy music, it still feels good. It's sad, you can even be brought to tears, yet you still feel good. So that's a true feeling. And a true feeling comes from a state of suspension. And what differentiates it from other things that have sensations attached to it. And sensations come from collapses of attractions. And they're stored in our body mind, just like any other memory of any kind of experience. And these get added into the mix, into the amalgam, but they're not true feelings or pure emotion. They're sensations attached to those experiences. If someone collapsed or somehow it collapsed on you. So anger and guilt, for example, are not true feelings. They are the collapse of a state of emotion with sensations of falling and they're survival strategies, controlling others to stop the falling. That's what they actually are. And we can differentiate it from a true feeling. So when you're in these non-true feelings that we mistake as true, for example, fear is not emotion. Fear is the collapse of a state of emotion. And it's as close as the central nervous system can get to emotion. It's been confused with emotion. But there aren't 7 primal emotions, only one emotion. There aren't 7 kinds of gravities, only one gravity. Wherever you can say gravity, you can say of emotion, and vice versa. Which is why emotion works so much like water flowing downhill. It's exactly, and we say it washed over me, and we even say your juices. We even talk about it as a liquid. And the reason is the gravitational connection is a force. It's a monolithic force of attraction. So at any rate, you can parse apart an emotional experience by what feels good, what is pure positive, what's a sensation swirling around in there, and you can start to parse it apart. So when you're having a true feeling, the difference is you're not operating from pressure in the head, which is where anger and guilt ultimately end up. They're equal opposites of the same thing. And they're both preceded. If we notice, before you have guilt or anger response, you feel a collapse from the heart into the deep gut, and up comes the rage. And the rage comes out explosively. I call that anger. I don't call that rage. I call that anger. And that's preceded by a collapse and then load overload and volcanic kind of activity. And it leaves you enervated. You don't feel energized. You feel lack of energy afterwards, a depletion. And the difference between that and a true feeling is you feel a welling up. Whatever, all the energy in the environment, you feel welling up and coming out through your heart. And now there can't be too much energy. So if you're in a load overload, there can be don't rock the boat. Don't move. Nobody move. So you can see the animals that are in load overload, they can only handle a certain rate of change. Too much energy, fight, flight. Whereas when they're in heart, and I call this is when that deeper layer of stress comes up, rage, but takes residence in the heart as this welling. I call that rage of the heart, which is courage. And now whatever happens is just energy going towards your object. And you are energized. After you experience, you feel yabba dabba do. You don't feel judgmental. You don't feel lack of energy, enervated. You feel empowered. So that's a distinction. That's why it's so important not to judge against emotion as energy. If it runs to ground, it's always good. If that electricity comes in your house and goes out back to ground, you're always safe. Now, we began with this image with the movie of the Greyhound running at full speed. Obvious joy in his eyes, his expression, his whole body was a fluid dynamo, moving. Every bit of stimulus that energized him was coming out through pure, efficient, effective movement. And he couldn't feel better than that. He's flying, he's weightless. The goal of every behavior is to get back to weightlessness, to achieve that state of weightlessness. If we take that as our standard, and that is verified by constructal law, that the placement of that dog's organs, how big his heart is, how his brain works, is all a function of him moving that well. Everything about an animal's physiology and behavior is a function of how he evolved to move. And as I began, if you can move well in any situation, you have achieved a state of emotional well-being. And it's independent of material consequences. You might lose the fight, but I did pretty good. I hit the ball hard and just didn't fall. But as long as you moved well, your body, you emotionally expressed yourself, you feel satisfied. So at any rate, what that also means is that his mind works according to that metric of well-being as a function of movement. So every object he perceives comes to mind relative to being able to move that well. In other words, it's a function of resistance to him being able to do that. So the easiest way for an object to be integrated into this beautiful flowing movement would be to run over, pick it up, and run with it. And hence we see dogs love to play, throw the ball, they run it. They pick it up and they can run with it. Dogs like to chase the ball. But that also applies to more complex things that don't fit in the mouth. And my expression is, if you can't fit it in the mouth and eat it, join it. And now, if I get you to move relative alignment and in syncopation with me, that's the same as ingestion. So the ingestive impulse, the oral urge, is actually a function of that greyhound running weightless and achieving a state of weightlessness. So what I just said was, this urge to move that beautifully is, I can't move well unless I can't eat you. That'll produce friction. But if we move well together, now we're a network. So they actually achieve a network consciousness by the syncopated movement. And if we look at everything the dog is, and you really should look at the working dogs as the template, because they didn't domesticate the dog for companionship. That's another romantic fantasy that has screwed up the dog-owner relationship. The dog is domesticated as a function of hunting. And every breed is a derivative of the hunting impulse. Terriers, sheepdogs, sighthounds, greyhounds, it's all about hunting. And in order for us, so what we've seen is dog and humans got together through the hunt. Probably happened at least 40,000 years ago, according to the latest archaeological evidence. And then that allowed man to domesticate the reindeer, the nomads. So now the prey, we don't have to run and find them. We got them. Now we can use their milk, cheese, yogurt, hides. When they get old, we can have meat, whatever we want it. So according to constructal law, these objects of resistance integrated into a greater flow system, and that begat the domestication of all the animals. The domestication of animals made it possible to live in villages and cities, and human civilization followed from there. And it could all come from that humble beginning of early man teaming up with proto-dog wolf and hunting together. And that is constructal law, more efficient flow, improving the flow. And so the wolf wanted more than he can get on his own. Humans want more than they can have on their own. And if you want the same thing, but it's more than you can get on your own, you can communicate and connect. And that's what brought our two species together. And heart makes that union. When the dog and the human wanted the same prey, with the same desire, they could communicate and connect. They move together well. And that is an elaboration on the network that may very well have produced human civilization. So anyhow, that's, we take the greyhound, how objects come to his mind as a function of getting back to weightlessness. If you move in sync, in alignment with others, you feel weightless. And that's a true feeling. But you got to parse apart the thoughts, the sensations that distract you from the weightlessness. Now, there's a wonderful book that helps us see how these underlying principles actually guide and motivate us by Daniel Pink, called Drive. And he's extrapolating some very important truths and applying it to the human experience and factoring out the thought process along the way. And his standard for gratification and proper motivation intrinsically being driven is autonomy, feeling autonomous, mastery, and purpose. And I don't take issue with any of that, but I'm saying there's this underlying layers, much quicker to get to, which is, in order for us to have personal integrity, which would be the beginning of autonomy, the amazing thing is we have to network and achieve alignment and synchronization with the relevant emotional variables in our world. And to repeat my expression, if you can't eat them, join them. So if you can project your feeling into another, which is what emotional projection is. I feel what you feel. I can't feel good unless you feel good, which is what that Greyhound is running into it. He runs into an object. For me to get to weightless, you got to get to weightless. And that's what we're seeing when dogs are playing, is they're going back and forth and becoming weightless together. I can't feel good unless you feel good. That's the group heart energy. But the important thing is it comes from the individual feeling flow, not being controlled, which is so important with constructal law. Agent goes back and forth. It's got to be free to morph. You can't constrain it. So when the energy runs to ground, it always morphs into the coherent design. So all the energy is grounded, it runs through the channel, and the system flourishes. It's always expanding, it's always improving. And so we really should be talking about dogs and how they work according to this concept of drive. So that integration. But he feels self-empowered, because the emotion is flowing smoothly through his body. He feels. So a dog that's herding sheep is moving in sync with all those sheep and a sheep herder, and that feels better than actually making prey on that sheep. That's actually what's happening. He's getting more energy, because now he's in his heart, he's getting the energy of 500 sheep, plus the praise of the owner. And he's feeling energized. All that energy. When those sheep move, he's feeling this welling up, and he's running his path, and he's keeping them contained. And he's feeling joy of movement by working with the herder. And that's heart energy. That's the network. And that's always improving. It allowed us to create civilization. That simple integration. So the dog feels totally free, autonomous, but he's 100% integrated into the network and masters it. No matter what happens, however spike of intensity comes his way, it gets channeled into that work. And that's the purpose of not only the way he's constructed, the way we're constructed. And that's why humans and dogs are so entrained. And it's got nothing to do with wanting to please us. If you want to please someone, that's not a want. It's you versus them. It has to come from within. And that dog wants to be with those sheep so bad, more than he wants to be alive. And he gets to run and achieve weightlessness like the Greyhound by working in harmony with the sheep herder and keeping the sheep contained and calm. And that's his reward. And there's no external reward for that. There's no extrinsic reward. It's self-reinforcing. If he runs into a rock, it increases his drive to do it. He gets that rock, running into the rock adds energy to his system, and it makes him better. So that's what we're supposed to learn from dogs as the ultimate network animal. No judgment, no thoughts, pure feeling. True feeling, pure emotion, all heart. So that's the thermodynamics of dogdom.